This week on the Markcast, are we invading Canada regardless? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we should go F ourselves. I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
I'll tell you, when it's out there, we're gonna cover it. We're gonna talk about it. Mr. Dan Ralph, Canadian Press, talking about the Argos potentially still wanting to work with the XFL. We're having Dan on the show. We're gonna figure out what's going on with all this stuff.
December 13th, the day after Grey Cup. Guess what? We're gonna be talking about this. I'm convinced that it's not going away, and it may be on the back burner, but the stove's not off. It's just simmering right now.
And I mean, we're saying the Argos, but we mean MLSC, the group that owns the Argos wanted to come over. And, there's a lot of concerns about this single game betting. We bring some viewer comments into the fold and some very nuanced thoughts this week. And we're trying to detach our emotions from this entire merger. We just want peace. We just want to enjoy football.
Yeah, and we're also bringing on Murray McCormick. He's covering the Roughriders. We're going to talk about everything going on with Riders camp and all the injuries and the COVID protocols, all that stuff.
I thought it was funny that he didn't know there were 12 guys on the field. And as one guy mentioned, I said, wait till he finds out there's a C in defense, as we spell our words.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty good one. It's an adjustment for guys.
And then Coach Hal Mumme of the linemen, formerly of the Renegades, Air Raid, the Godfather, right? They call him the Air Raid offense. He is going to be on the show. It's a tremendous interview. Does that seem more intriguing of a place to wind up as a player or as a coach than to wait around for whatever Danny and company is going to do with XFL?
Oh yeah, I want to do the USFL.
And for those who gatekeep about us being CFL members,
you're mad.
We got our names on the fan base at the Grey Cup. Reed hooked that up. Look at that.
Official Grey Cup fan base members here, the Markcast podcast for all time.
It's all happening this week on the Markcast. Good Friday morning to everybody. It is the Markcast. How are you doing?
I have acquired an upgrade in my life. Viewers of the podcast will know, and hopefully listeners won't know this too bad if I have a lisp, but we are working on the tooth root extraction as we speak. I have braces now on my front 8 teeth. So, that's great at the age of 35 to go back to middle school again.
Hey, you know what? They've wanted to put something in my teeth to kind of correct my overbite too. So I might be right there with you, depending on, whatever. Got my cool little Argos football towel that, was sent to me. Hopefully I'm still allowed to have that. So,
yeah, we're gonna get into that. I have some thoughts on that. First off, welcome to the show. Thank you all for coming. Please subscribe. I do think we have a tremendous show today, and then I'm also lining up next week because I'm going to be on vacation through the weekend. I have a great lineup already scheduled for next week, so that's exciting. We have some people signed up. Paul, I heard that put your money where your mouth is. I heard a lot of these things. We now are official members of the Grey Cup fan base.
Look at that. Thank you.
Look at that. Yesterday, Paul and I were having a discussion, and this is where this is all going to end, and this is where we're all going to get to with this, because I think some of the feedback last week was, obviously about the merger and all those things, the talks and everything. There was a little bit of we're really done hearing you guys talk about CFL, XFL hate. Totally agree. So here's what we're going to do. I feel like we don't have to prove anything to anybody anymore. We paid the, 300 Canadian to get on the fan base. It's going to be on there. The Markcast podcast is going to be on the Grey Cup fan base, which is just a tremendous thing. And we're going to get a certificate, all that stuff. So I'm good with this now. There was a lot of negativity even today with a lot of the Argos talk that we're going to get into with Dan Ralph and all that. I'm really not engaging in that anymore. I really do feel like Paul and I don't really have to prove anything. Are we on the same page with that? I'm kind of over all that.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. I've had conversations with people recently, won't say who, but just dude, how do we get this stuff to stop? And they've expressed their concerns about things that people on our side of the coin have said. And I've kind of pointed out we kind of ate shit pardon my French, for a long, long, long time. And we kind of just were like, yeah, we're respectful. And then once everything fell apart, kind of like you guys kept dumping a little bit. So basically now it's kind of like, let's just let cooler heads prevail here. And, let's enjoy this. Let's just enjoy football in general, please.
Yeah. And so that's, I'm very much not in that anymore. I want this to be excited. I had just DM'd the BC Lions. I want to figure out the single game tickets for the October 16th game. And then if you're going to go to that as well, I know Dorothy and I are going to go. And then obviously the Grey Cup and all that. So, I mean, that's where we're at. So I just, some of the feedback on the YouTube was like, we're done with the bitching and complaining. And I get that. That's very valid. And we are moving on. And we are still talking the Argos today because that's in the news and the XFL and all that. But then we'll plug the show. But we're figuring out the giveaway with the Argos stuff, right? Are we going to do that?
Yeah, let's do like, what are we at subscriber wise right now?
Well, we're going to do the Jousters merch at 1,500. They didn't really move the needle. So maybe we'll add the Jousters in one of those, one of the Grey Cup or one of the Argos things.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's throw one of the Argos jerseys into our 1,500 mark. If we hit 1,500, we'll pick two names at random, and I guess what there's three.
It'd be three, yeah.
So 3 names at random, and we'll send out, depending on your sizes and stuff, we'll send out some Jousters or some Argos merchandise.
Yeah, and we kind of do it before where if you can kind of say like which one you want to be in the running for. Yeah. So just anyway, make sure you subscribe. We got a lot of stuff. I was back again on the Third Down Gamble podcast. I got out a lot of my angst about the XFL stuff, which I feel like is why I'm now at peace with a lot of that. I think that I got a little heated on that, but we talked a lot about the XFL fallout with the merger, the single game sports betting, kind of all that stuff. And so that episode's going to be coming out soon as well. So thanks to them for having me on as well.
Reed earlier in the week pointed this comment on Facebook out about the single game betting. I believe this is, single game betting. And once I read it through it, I was like, someone's getting it. And it's like we've had concerns, and it's not like this isn't a knock on the CFL. We've had concerns about how the single game betting is going to save the CFL. It's like there it is. One of those things that's quote unquote going to save the CFL, like everything else is going to save the CFL. Look at like when we're being critical of the CFL in general, we're being critical of the decisions that are made and people just blindly believing that these things are going to save the CFL. We're not knocking the product. We're not attacking your league. We're just saying like there's a constant flow of thought like, oh, Johnny Manziel, he's going to save our league. Rocket Ishmael, he's going to save our league. Anyway, this guy, John C., gave a great, John Turner. I'm sorry. I said John C. because it's about C218. He gave a great quote on Facebook, and I'll just read a little bit of it. He basically pointed out the lowest value team in the NFL is worth 20 times what this entire CFL is worth. I know people are going to be like, well, there's going to be people that say the owners of the CFL teams have more money than Redbird, and we're not getting into that. We're just getting into how much the teams are worth. How much it would be to buy an NFL team, you'd have to basically spend, 20 times what you would spend on the entire CFL. That's the truth.
Well, and AJ Jackiebeck of the Red Blacks famously said that, some of the franchises are worth $1, so. I mean,
yeah, he definitely said that. So he talks about, the CFL is going to make money on CFL affiliated books. That means if they don't have a stake in a book, they clearly probably don't have a stake in DraftKings or, FanDuel. You're limiting the amount of people that are going to be able to come in and partake in the single game betting. And I don't know how big Bodog is. I'm assuming it's pretty big up there, but the big players down here are DraftKings and FanDuel. That's the big players. And if you're not allowing them into your single game betting options, you're limiting yourself on avenues. So basically it looks like from what this guy is saying, the CFL is going to make some money on the CFL affiliated books. They don't have any stake in the non-affiliated books that's where the majority of the gambling revenue is going to come on. That's what I just pointed out. The CFL is too worried about doing business with Canadian companies and Canadian people to understand that money outside of Canada is what matters. That's what we've been saying. You want to grow the game, you got to make sure more people are watching. If that means south of your border, Canada, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
The other thing, and I pointed this out on my Third Down Gamble podcast, and the comment talks on this too. It's a really long comment, but in a normal NFL season, you have 32 teams, 16 games potentially a week that you can bet on, right? And of those 16 games, real gamblers are only going to bet on a few of those, right? A handful. And if the CFL, when you only have 4 games a week, not all of those are going to be appealing matchups, right? And we've heard a lot that the later you go in the CFL season, you get a lot of like 2-12 versus 3 and whatever. Well, you're not going to be gambling on those. So just saying like, well, there's 20 billion whatever a year the NFL makes, so that's going to be 10% whatever for the CFL. Like that's assuming that people are betting on all these games. Which if you have 4 games each week, not necessarily everyone's going to bet on 100% or even 50% of those games.
And I mean, yeah, 100% right. I'm not going to, if the Lions are doing bad and I'm a gambler, and if the Lions and they wouldn't be doing bad, but I'm trying to think of it. I don't even know. Like, I know the Lions are allegedly a bad team. If the Lions and Argos are playing, I love the Argos, but they haven't been good that lately. I've seen the records. If they're playing, I'm not going to bet on that game. I'm just not going to do it. So, you're talking about maybe 1 game, maybe 2 games, 1 game, maybe 2 games.
Yeah.
And not the entire slate.
Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate that. Really good show today. So again, there's a lot of talk about the Argos to the XFL. There's been a lot of posts online. This is speculation. This is BS. We need to focus on training camps, all these things. We're going to have Dan Ralph on the podcast. So Dan Ralph wrote the article. He's with the Canadian Press. He's in the CFL Hall of Fame. So I don't think that Dan is just like shooting from the hip here. Dan is gracious enough. He's going to come on. We're going to talk about it. If it's legitimate, we're going to discuss it. We're going to figure it out. But this whole this is just speculation. Mike Mitchell was on last week, said the XFL is interested in Canada, with or without emerging with the CFL. Dan Ralph the next day comes out with this article saying that the Argos are very much still interested. So this isn't just BS. We're just trying to keep this narrative alive of the XFL CFL thing. This is still very much in the news. And while it's in the news, we're going to talk about it. We're going to lead with that. If you're not interested in that, that's fine. We're going to have Murray McCormick on with the Regina Leader-Post. I got a million questions for him about the Roughriders practice, the injuries with the players. There was some COVID stuff this week, Paxton Lynch, all these kind of things. So we're going to do all that. Then I have a wonderful interview that I just did this morning, bright and early. Hal Mumme, I think, was eating breakfast, but Hal Mumme, legendary air raid coach of the linemen. He was with the offensive, with the Renegades. He came on. We talk all sorts of TSL and USFL and players to watch and all these kind of things. So I really appreciate Sammy and the guys over at the Spring League for getting that put together. But anyway, so that's kind of the order of events. We're going to do Argo stuff here, break, talk to Dan, tons of CFL stuff, all the whatever, talk to Murray, and then we're going to do the Hal Mumme thing. So just, if it's in the news, I don't want to hear this like it's speculation. We're trying to draw this narrative out when it's still very much in the news right now.
That's what happens when you have a group that owns the Argonauts, that has an NBA team, has an NHL team, owns the Marlies. They've had success, and they own Toronto FC. Toronto FC has won an MLS Cup in the last, 4 years, 5 years? They have successes in other sports. They want to have the Argos be a success. So don't shoot the messenger. This is what we're talking about. With that being said, what's going on here with this thing?
So we, Mike was on the show last week. We had all this. I think it was the next day. I think it was the Friday that our interview came out with Mike and all this stuff. Dan Ralph with the Canadian Press posted an article talking about how, the 148-year-old Argos franchise, they lose around $12 million every year, and that they're still very, very much interested in working with the XFL in whatever regard that is. I don't know. And what are your thoughts on that? And obviously, we're going to talk with Dan and get his take. But what are your thoughts on that and just kind of the poo-pooing of this from? I hear a lot of people poo-pooing this right now.
I think it's going to be a situation where are they going to be able to? I think the big catch here is here's what when I'm looking at first glance. I'm looking at this going, okay. It is clear the MLSE wants to be with the XFL.
Yeah.
That is clear as day. It doesn't look like Montreal wants to hitch themselves entirely to Toronto. Like we were told, like Montreal kind of goes lockstep with Toronto, and no disrespect to Montreal. I just don't think, I'm not sure the XFL is open right now to going, let's get 2 Canadian teams, up there. Let's go for that. I think the biggest thing I can draw from this is, does MLSC actually take the franchise, or do they have to sell the franchise back to the CFL and then just get an expansion team in Toronto, which at that point means all these different XFL teams have to get owners as well, because you have to franchise these things out. You can't just have one group owning one franchise and the league owning the other 8. So there's a lot of things I think need to be like worked out on the XFL side of things to make this a reality. And
to be fair, I really think this is a horrendous idea. Like, I'm not trying to be like the XFL homer here. Like, we're taking over the CFL. Like, I think if Toronto does not care about a CFL team, that much. I mean, they care, but not that much. I really don't think they're going to care about an XFL team. So I'm not trying to say this is but I mean, this is in the news. This is in the zeitgeist. So this is what's happening. But I'm not saying that this is a good plan for them. I think they're better off going to Mexico. But that's just me.
I think it's going to be a different thing if, say, Toronto got an NFL team. Then you'd see Toronto people care about it, because there's a chance. If you have a Toronto NFL team, you get to see like Patrick Mahomes once every 8 years come play on your field, or that kind of thing. That's why it would care. It would matter if it were an NFL team. And I think them having a CFL team moves the needle more than them having an XFL team at this point. But I could be surprised. Yeah. And that's a positive thing for the CFL, I'm saying right there.
Anyway, so MLSE spokesman Dave Hageth said, that right now they're focused on the CFL's return to play. They're excited for the league and the fans. Dan kind of propositions 3 different kind of solutions here, and we'll talk about it with him. Obviously, you can have Toronto join the XFL in 2023. You can have them sell the Argos, or they need to focus on figuring out the business model for the CFL that's going to make MLSE happy. We have some notes later about potential revenue sharing coming out with the CFL. It is very frustrating, I believe, for MLSE to, it's hard with these teams and the money and the business structure and the CFL. And again, we talked last week, okay, we're moving on from the XFL. Now we're going to get back to figuring out our stuff. Well, I don't know what was stopping any of that before. So
it's definitely interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. And I mean, you're never going to be able to, without a fight in Canadian court, you're not going to be able to take the name Toronto Argonauts to the XFL. You're just not going to be able to. It would be great for prestige wise, and it would be something that would elevate the XFL, the twice failed league. But you're just not going to be able to walk away with that name without a fight. So
unless they sell it, unless Argos, unless the MLSC, if they own the team and they sell it, if they sell it and then they want to offload and get an NFL franchise, that's what I feel the play is. I don't think that they're wanting to be involved. I don't think MLSC is wanting to be involved in the. I think they're wanting to pass the Argos. It's hot potato. Let's go. Like, hey, we're losing money on this. Like, we got to move on from this. That's what I think.
As opposed to just fixing what's wrong. I don't know.
It's so much easier to pass the buck than this to really do the work, right? That's Arash and all these people came on and said, they're looking at the XFL, because it's easier to do that like injection shot than it is to do the work, and really build through everything. So,
and it's ironic because you feel like the group MLSE group would be probably the best that would be poised to figure out the marketing, because they have the experience with owning the pro teams in the NHL, in the NBA. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
Again, the quote from the XFL Insider last week on the merger falling apart was, we had a lot of cool ideas and they didn't want to get on board. So maybe MLSE has a lot of cool ideas too that people don't want to get on board with. Anyway, so yeah, I'm good on the Argos. I think we should talk to Dan, and then
all right, let's bring Dan in right now. Let's take a quick commercial break, bring Dan in, and then we'll talk more about this. Dan Ralph with the Canadian Press joining us now. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Ralph.
My pleasure. Old home week.
Good to have you back. Maybe not. This is the last time we talk to you about this stuff. I don't know if we're allowed to cover the CFL anymore. I'm kidding. So we really appreciate you coming back and talking about everything that's going on with the Toronto situation, among other things.
My pleasure.
How you been lately? I feel like you're starting to pick back up and get in the swing of things again.
Yeah, training camp started. They opened on Saturday, and good news is everything's Zoom. The bad news is we're still in Zoom, but until we get into one-on-one situations, unfortunately, a lot of us are still covering the league from our basements or our offices. But hey, we got football to talk about, so I'm a pretty happy camper.
I appreciate you coming on. Obviously we had our big Mike Mitchell interview last week and Farhan talking all about this, the de-evolution of these XFL, CFL talks, right? And then I believe your article came out on Friday, kind of outlining a lot of this with Toronto and everything. Obviously ruffled a lot of feathers because I think a lot of people really thought okay, we're done talking about the XFL now. We don't have to deal with that. Before I want to get your take on this, I just want to preface everyone listening to this that Mr. Dan Ralph here was the one that when all these talks originally happened, you were the first reporter that came out, had the big interview about everything, had quotes from Danny Garcia, had quotes from Jeffrey Pollack, had quotes from Randy Ambrosi. So, this is not... We are going to the source here of someone that is covering this stuff, right? I mean, this isn't just us rampantly speculating out of nowhere.
Well, I appreciate that, but truth be told, there was a bunch of us on that Zoom, so I was but one of. But yeah, thank you.
Yes. So, what was the reaction?
When my contract comes up, I need you as my agent.
There you go. What was your what was the reaction to this big article that Toronto, the Argonauts, MLSE are still very much interested in working with the XFL?
Well, this is the interesting thing is within the space of about 24 hours, I had two people whose opinions I very much hold dear to my heart, pretty much spell out the same scenario. Like I said, within a 24-hour period. Now, whether maybe they talk to each other, I don't know. But I found, when two people who I feel are in the know pretty much paint the same scenario, that, there's a little bit of credence to it. And the way I wrote it, quite frankly, it was an analysis piece. And here were three options for MLSE to consider moving forward. This was after the CFL had made the announcement that talks with the XFL at this time, and let's preface those three words, at this time had been had ceased. So the CFL did not say that talks were over 100% done, we're moving on. All they said was, with the season approaching, we've put the talks with the XFL, we've ceased those talks at this time. And I think those three words are what resonated with me. And like I said, to have two people whose opinions I respect, point the scenario that MLSE could have three options facing it after 2021, to me gives it credence. And from what I'm hearing now, it's still giving it credence. I mean, I know people in Canada don't want to hear it. I know people in Canada are very protective of the CFL entity. But all I say is don't kill the messenger here, We've
actually said that on this episode. Yeah. Don't kill the messenger. We're just going with what we're being told, and we're just reporting and kind of giving our takes on things. Out of those three scenarios that you pointed out, one being the Argos get sold or whatever. What do you think is the most likely at this point? Where we stand right now? Can you give us some insight? Which one do you think is the most likely? Putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think what's going to happen is the Argos have, from what I've been told, MLSE has approached the board about the adoption of some sort of revenue sharing model to help clubs that are struggling. The thing that's unique about the CFL is you've got three separate ownership entities. You've got privately owned clubs like Toronto, Vancouver, and Hamilton. You've got community-owned clubs like Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Saskatchewan. And you've got the other three clubs that are owned by ownership groups, conglomerates. So you've got three different business models that you're dealing with here. And so, but I do know that some of the clubs have been very, very persistent in trying to develop a revenue sharing model to help the haves share with the have-nots. And on paper, I get it. I don't understand how you can adopt a revenue sharing model that addresses the three biggest markets in your league. And you're asking the community-based clubs, which are the three clubs that annually before COVID posted a profit, to have to give money to help offset the expenses incurred by the bigger clubs. And I mean, the optics of that just don't sit well with me. But so I'm being told that model is being discussed, and there's optimism that something could be introduced either during the year or at season's end. So I think that's a potential. I think there's also the potential that MLSE could sell the club. Problem is that I don't know who's out there to buy it. And I mean, when MLSE purchased the Argos in 2017, my thought was this, that if anybody could make a go of it in Toronto, it was that organization. They've got all the resources in the world. They've been able to enhance the value of the other franchises they own, like the NHL Leafs, the NBA Raptors, MLS's Toronto FC. So, I mean, I kind of thought if anybody had the Midas touch, it was that organization. But since, even after winning a Grey Cup in 2017, this organization has struggled financially. So I don't know. I can't say they've done anything wrong. They moved the franchise. They've moved it forward, and they've invested money in it. I don't know. So, I mean, do I think the XFL is a viable entity? Yeah, I do. Do I think it's the most, it's the most popular entity? Maybe not. But do I think it's on the table? Yeah, I do.
To that point, is it a situation where the MLSE group, and you brought up optics, that's so key right now. It's like MLSE is probably one of the most lucrative ownership groups, if not the most lucrative. You can debate that all day. They make money on everything else.
Yep.
And maybe the fans are just like, hey guys, you guys make so much money on your other products. Can you not deal with the losses here?
Well, they can deal with the losses. I mean, they can. I mean, let's look at they pay hockey players and basketball players millions upon millions upon millions. Now, they do get TV money and they do get other funds to help them, but there's no questioning the financial resources of MLSE. I don't. I just think that, quite frankly, everything they have done from a sports ownership platform has been a success, except this one. And, when they came in, they said all the right things that we knew, that it was going to take, maybe 3 to 5 years to make this a go. I think they're probably looking now thinking, wait a minute, it's not going to take 3 to 5. It may take 8 to 10, which means we're going to lose a lot of money. And trust me, $100 million is $100 million, whether you're a billionaire or a millionaire. So I just think now all of a sudden they're at a crossroads and they have to make a decision. Do we continue trying to build up this sports entity to where it, case scenario, maybe makes it $1 million or breaks even? Or do we look at other ways to try and speed up that? I think MLSE is a lot of things, but they are also very forward thinking. And I think this shows that they are forward thinking.
Well, and no one, I think they do. No one should own a team or run a business just to break even, right? Which is fundamentally at the core of some of the problems with the CFL, right? Is some of these teams are just in the business of breaking even or not losing a lot of money. Is it the idea that like you said, MLSE potentially wants to get out, maybe align themselves for an NFL team potentially in Toronto instead, and they're just looking for, like you said, who's going to buy. Here, the XFL might buy. I mean, is it just that we've heard in the past, they were some of the ones that kind of helped start these talks anyway with the XFL, that they're just saying like they'll just pass it on to them and say like, it's like we talked on the show, it's like hot potato, like we're done with it, like we're just going to pass this on to someone else and get out while we can.
Well, I just, like I said, I think they're very forward thinking. I think they leave no stone unturned, and I heard the same thing you guys did, that they were the ones who were really, I won't say spearheading because I don't think that's the right word, but I think they were the ones at the front of the line to look at this option, and for every reason. I mean, I think they could look and see what Redbird and what Dwayne Johnson can bring to the table in terms of marketing opportunities and ways to sell the product in Toronto, because I think it's become very, very apparent to them and very, very apparent to many is that the status quo of the CFL just doesn't work for MLSE. And I don't see, in my humble opinion, and this is only me speaking, I can't see MLSE standing for the status quo for much longer within the CFL. So if they're not going to stand for the status quo, then we're down to three options.
How and I guess I'm taking a question from Reed's mouth and spitting it out. If MLSE can't really make the CFL team work, how are they supposed to make an XFL team work, assuming that that's the play here?
Well, it's something new, and you're getting marketing from a U.S. venture too. You got a U.S. TV deal, quite possibly, and I think you just have an opportunity to sell a new entity, because the current entity or the current status quo doesn't work for you. So you're willing to try and find something, at least push the envelope and see if that works. And I mean, if it doesn't work, at least you tried, type thing, right? My only concern, though, quite frankly, is what happens if it doesn't work? And then what happens to football in Toronto? I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but that would be my question.
I am, and we said this on the show, because I'm not an XFL homer by any means. I mean, I'll call it like I see it, and I am terrified of the idea of bringing an XFL team to Toronto. And I think we're at the point where communication from both leagues has been so poor regarding all of this. And I think, and I know that the online doesn't speak for everybody, but I think it is such a toxic environment right now that I think that the disinterest that Toronto has in the current Argos would turn into almost like out of spite, we're not going to support an XFL team here.
Almost like how the new ownership group for the Sonics came in, Clay Bennett and everyone, and the Seattle fans kind of like revolted and refused to go to games, which therefore meant Seattle moved, that kind of thing.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's a valid point, because I mean, the Argos have a core group of fans that like the CFL, that love the Argos, and the problem is that core is too small right now, and they've had trouble in the last decade growing that core, and so the demographic needs to be revamped, and I think it needs to get younger. And you're talking to a guy who's among the older ones, so I mean, I'm not the demographic they want to appeal to. So the real threat is if you do bring in a different entity, that core group, and I wish I could tell you definitively how big that core group is, but judging by home crowds, you're probably looking at anywhere from 4,000 to 7,500 fans. You alienate that. So I think that would be a very, very viable byproduct of going down that path. Yeah, I think you're right.
Could they take the name Argonauts with them to an XFL?
That's a really good question. I don't. That's way past my pay grade. I suspect not, but I don't know for sure. And I mean, I'm not sure if they would want to. I would think they'd probably want they would want a fresh new start.
Yeah, it seems weird to me. I know there's been a lot of backlash this week about this, but when we have Mike Mitchell on, basically saying the same thing that XFL is very much either with the CFL or without the CFL. Let's say Argonauts are off the table. Let's say they're still CFL still doing their own thing.
Yeah.
If the XFL now is just saying, well, we want to be in Toronto regardless, right? I mean, do you see them or what would you think the chances would be of that? Do we have two teams there? I mean, that's why we come to this conclusion, right? Because immediately you go, well, if the XFL adds a team, then you're going to have two. Well, obviously they're just going to, I mean, it's really easy to get to the conclusion of somehow this has to break, right?
Yeah, I would. It would be interesting because the Arena Football was in the Arena Football League was in Toronto for 1 year, and so we did have a situation where technically you did have two football franchises in the same city. Now it was very, very short lived, and it didn't last long. So you're talking about two outdoor football entities now, and the NFL is big in, as you know, the NFL is big in Southern Ontario, and maybe four down football would be something that some people would get excited about. My only concern is that Toronto is such a fickle sports market that if it's not deemed the best, not deemed the top, then you struggle to get people out. And this is the thing that kills me about Toronto's football market is that, you know what, the CFL, the NFL, in my lifetime, I don't believe is coming to Toronto. And so the best football you're going to get right now is the Toronto Argonauts. So you either choose to embrace it and support it, or you choose not to embrace it and you leave it. Now, the TV numbers would suggest that there is a good base of people who watch the CFL. The problem is getting them to the park.
What's Arena Football, by the way? Is that the 22-year spring league that was successful for a little while? I don't know.
I got to cover one game and one game only. And that was
just curious.
I mean, David Baker, I love David Baker. Don't get me wrong. I loved him when he was the commissioner, but Arena Football was just not something that it was not. It didn't catch on. Let's put it that way.
Up there or here in America? Wow.
Could you make the argument? Although, you know what?
22 years. 22 years.
I was going to say. And one of a coach, John Gregory, who coached up here with Saskatchewan and Hamilton and has a Grey Cup ring and was coach of the year. He coached the Iowa Barnstormers when having a brain cramp, the quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback, played the arena game, went on to St. Louis. Oh, Kurt Warner. When Kurt Warner played arena ball. So
I mean, 32 years, by the way, 32, not 22, 32 years.
Okay.
The thing to me is, and like you talked about, if it's not deemed big time in Toronto, right? I mean, that was a very similar problem that the XFL had, right? In LA, in New York, it's very difficult to get media attention, right? When, New York media, LA media, and that's why, at the end of all this, what killed me the most about, all this like anti-XFL, whatever, I'm like, fundamentally, these are the same leagues with just different rules and stuff, grassroots, smaller towns. I mean, they're talking about adding a team to San Antonio, right? I mean, that's not traditionally a large market football town. And so it's like, again, it's why it's so frustrating with all these talks and everything is fundamentally both of these leagues suffer from the same problems, right? It's viewed out as the poo-poo league that's not the NFL. One's up north, one's down south, and so yeah, I don't think replacing the letters on the Argonauts with another league fixes the problem that it's still looked at as third-rate football, even though it shouldn't be. I mean, but it is, right?
I would agree with you. I think. But I give. This is where I do give MLSC some credit that at least they know that what's going on right now isn't working. So they're at least trying to explore other things. I don't know. I'm not so sure that this was the way to go, just for some of the reasons you just reiterated. To be honest.
Switching gears in a way, still talking about how to bring revenue in, stuff like that. Your thoughts on the gambling bill, the single game sports gambling bill? How is that going to help? How is it going to help a struggling franchise like Toronto?
I think it's going to help some. I'm not quite so sure it's going to help as much as people in my industry seem to think it's going to help. I think it's going to help some. Like the thing is that you've got government involved in this now, and government will run it. Government will sanction it, and government will, to be honest, take its cut. And in Ontario, you've got 3 teams. They're all going to be vying for the same thing, right? Now, what I think it does do is it does open up the potential for sponsorship agreements where you can have kiosks in stadiums and you can engage get more fan interest. But I'm not so sure that it's gonna net the millions that some of my brethren think so. But having said that, even if it brought in, let's say, $500,000 per franchise, the CFL is one league where its teams can stretch that 500,000 5 different ways, and it's $500,000 they didn't have then and don't have now. And I think any financial assistance for the league is something that it will welcome with open arms. But and I think some organizations will benefit from this, and others maybe not quite so much.
It's just hard because at this point, all the CFL has done is cut, reduce staff, reduce payroll, shorten things. It's just at some point you got to turn the arrow in the other direction, right? And we can get through the season. And I do see a lot of, even when your article came out, and I saw a lot of like, well, it's just time to shut up and play. Training camps are starting. And I go, yeah, but the same people that criticize the CFL for the last 4 months about sweeping things under the rug and going to play, now we're saying, well, training camps are starting, so we just need to go. I'm like, these problems, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. I mean, it's just really weird. But I saw a lot of media last week when the XFL and all this stuff, they're like, no, like, stop talking about that now. We need to go play. And you're like, yeah, but all of these problems are still here when the world doesn't disappear when you close your eyes, right? It's still
pretty much, yeah. No, and that's what I found too. I think even right now, you're not going to hear a whole lot of XFL talk within the CFL because the season, we're in training camp. Season starts in August. We have a Grey Cup in December. But I guarantee you, gentlemen, December 13th, the day after Grey Cup, guess what? We're going to be talking about this. I'm convinced that it's not going away, and it may be on the back burner, but the stove's not off. It's just simmering right now. And when we get through a season, and every team in the CFL in 2021 is going to lose money. So guess what? We're going to be in the same exact position on the 13th of December that we are now, in that teams are going to be needing money, and they're going to be looking for alternate revenue sources. And I still think that this is the wording of that press release from the Canadian Football League at this time. Those are the 3 words that resonate with me. That, to me, they didn't say, you know what, we're done, finished, move on. They just said, we've got a season starting. That's where we're going to put all our efforts. And we've suspended talks with the XFL at this time.
I think to go along with that, and my last question today is, with Mike Mitchell and the reporting coming out that potentially that the XFL could be shifting from an April to June timeline as opposed from a February to April, leads credence as well to the idea of let's get it a little warmer up north in Canada and extend it out that way. I mean, again, I don't feel like we're drawing from nothing here. I feel like we try to do our job and due diligence, and it does seem like there is smoke here.
Yeah, and I'll give him credit too, because he brought up something I didn't even think about, and that's the whole internationalization, or that international look that the XFL is going to be looking at. And it's, I mean, we concentrate on Canada for obvious reasons, but their vision is not just solely on Canada. It's, I believe, in Mexico as well. So I mean, that would sort of fit into the global vision. And not too long ago, the commissioner of the CFL was talking about making the CFL into, Canadian football into a global entity. And he introduced a CFL 2.0 initiative and has working relationships with, I dare say, a dozen organizations around the world. So that seems to be the way that these leagues are going, because they're looking at potential revenue streams. Now, having said that, CFL 2.0 hasn't provided a dollar as far as I know. So the jury's still out. But when I took a look at his reporting, it made sense to me. It made sense to me.
You can't grow a league by keeping it in a bread basket, and that is sometimes the vibes that I see online, even today with a lot of this is, these Americans are covering my league, these covering our, spoiler, if you're extending this out internationally,
It's not our league anymore.
I mean, if you want to grow it and you want it to survive, you're going to have, it's like when you're in high school and you listen to a band and then they get bigger and you go, well, I knew them back. It is the way that the world works. So anyway, that is it for me today, but I wanted to, just thank you for coming on and hopping on with all this stuff, immediately after kind of the article came out.
Thank you so very much, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
All right, Hall of Famer Dan Ralph, the Canadian Press. I'm throwing it out there to help you in your contract negotiations when you need to renew your deal. So whatever we can do to help you get
I agree. You know what? I sort of led you guys down the garden path. I'm not contracted, sadly. I'm salaried.
Oh well.
Well, you could come on.
They should put you in a contract. What do you think?
Careful, then that means they could get rid of me after it too. So.
Oh man, we don't want that to happen. We thank you for your time, Dan.
Always a pleasure. Anytime, guys.
Appreciate it. Welcome back. I want to thank Dan for his time talking about the Argos, talking about all this ins and outs and what have yous and whatever nots. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm hopeful that everybody is happy at the end of the day with the resolution that comes from this.
I think a lot of people really thought, oh, okay, we don't have to talk about the XFL anymore, right? Ever since last week. And it's not us like trying to push this narrative, but it's like, this is always going to be a thing now. Like you guys think like, oh, we're done with the XFL. Like we don't have to deal with that. They're still going to be there and still making moves and stuff. So
anyway. All right, moving on. Murray McCormick's coming on here in a bit. In the meantime, we're going to quickly touch on these things. Riders, there's a lot of injuries going on with the Roughriders. Linebacker Dion Lacey, currently in the COVID-19 protocol. Of course, the Delta variant is still very much going. California, our caseload is going up, and 99% of the people that are sick haven't been vaccinated, but that's not a political statement. Again, you had to feel like this was going to happen with, second doses rolling out still very slowly. And he was on the field Sunday and Monday, and then
he's back today. But so there's a lot of questions of like, they pulled him, they didn't say why. Now he's back. It's like, well, was he testing positive? Now he's back. Like, what is the deal with that? And the weird thing is with the CFL is they're very secretive when it comes to like all the injury reports and like, oh, we don't like. Even there was a quote from Craig Dickinson that was like, "There's things I'm supposed to say when it comes to this. I'm not sure what it is. I'm sorry." Like they don't really know. Like, okay, how do we address these COVID things? He got pulled off. So we're gonna talk with Murray about it. But there's this is not going to be the first case, right, of someone testing positive or potentially testing positive or whatever. And the CFL really needs to figure out, like, okay, how are we going to address these things?
We're still getting, baseball players that are going into the COVID-19 protocols. I mean, Chris Paul was out, game 1 of the Western Conference Finals because of COVID-19 protocols. So we're still having these problems where players are, and it's not even a problem. Like, you randomly could get COVID. Yeah. It's not like you could do everything right and then slip once, and it could be like a non-malicious slip, and then all of a sudden you're in the COVID-19 protocols. For this is what I'm drawing from it. Lacey was probably around somebody that tested positive to COVID, and then he had to go get tested and make sure that he had the 2 tests to get cleared. That's what I'm gleaning here. Yeah. So.
We follow up. And we're going to talk with Murray. All the Roughriders that got injured, the 4 torn Achilles tendons. They said that they were probably doing some things that they weren't supposed to be doing. They were, doing some like non-supervised, coach enforced practices, and that's not good, right? I mean, it's one of those things where I think there's a lot of eyeballs on the CFL right now. We really got to dot our T's and cross our I, or whatever. Whatever the saying is.
Dot the I's.
Hey, I'll believe it I'll see it when I believe it. Okay. Just call me Patrick Mahomes over here. I'll see it when I believe it. But anyway, Farhan had some comments about that and Naylor, and they probably weren't doing some things they were supposed to do. The other interesting thing here is Andrew Harris, he's a star Blue Bombers player. There was a whole debate. I think it was Monday, like he left practice to go to like an appointment, came back. Now he's going to be sitting out for 2 weeks. Again, there's all these secretive, like, is he injured? Is he leaving? They always say like, oh, someone's hurt. It's a hangnail, right? Like they kind of BS whatever the injuries are. My note with this is not only is this scary right now with COVID and what's happening and all this stuff, but if you want to involve sports betting in the CFL with the players, the CFL needs to be way more transparent about like who is injured, how long they're injured. Thoughts on that, Paul?
As a Yankees fan who gets frustrated constantly when Aaron Boone just randomly sits someone down and isn't transparent about why he's sitting a player down, and then 2 days later we find out he's going on the 15-day IL. It is frustrating from that standpoint if you're a fan. And then you did pull up the most interesting part is that like this could dissuade someone who wants to spend big money at your sports book, your own Canadian only sports book, from betting on a game because someone's injured at the last minute, or maybe they do bet and you're not transparent with the information as to why they're injured, and all of a sudden they find out they're injured after they've already placed their bet and the game's already started. They can't pull their bet back. It's troublesome. It's troublesome to say the least.
Yeah, apparently the CFL is actually like trying to rework all of this right now that there is sports betting, because they've gotten away for years with like, oh, we don't need to, really tell you how long, the whole thing with salaries too. We don't know like player salaries. We don't know how long the contracts are. Like all these things, when you want to bring in sports betting, you have to be way more transparent about all this stuff. So we had statements here. The Players Association sent out this big thing talking about, we need to make sure the players are safe. 6 injuries occurred the day, 4 on the Roughriders, and then the other 2. I mean, they're basically saying like, if you see something, say something, don't do anything that you shouldn't be doing. But again, it's like do or die for the CFL. I mean, I just wouldn't be doing like unsupervised. I understand the want to play and the want to get in shape and all that, but I mean, it's really scary right now what's happening with all this stuff. The other note was this is interesting. We talk a lot about Solomon. I can't say it before. I couldn't say it with my braces. Elimian. He, I guess, has had, because of all the injuries and COVID and all this kind of stuff, he's actually had a lot of internal interest from coming back to a lot of CFL teams. He was approached to return in 2021. He's happily enjoying the retirement. He declined to reveal which teams they asked him for. But I just thought that was interesting that like, they're really relying on a lot of veterans right now, a lot of veteran presence to kind of figure this out. So, because
I mean, it's the situation where everything's up in the air. So if they can get someone that's well known to CFL fans, it could help drive. If you're playing 10 years in the CFL and you're considered a future Hall of Fame linebacker, that means you're going to drive some ticket sales. That means you're going to drive some merchandise sales. That means you're going to drive some revenue. So it would kind of make sense to kind of help extend the olive branch and, possibly bring you back. Reed's team, maybe still Reed's team. We haven't decided yet. Offensive lineman from the Edmonton Elks, Colin Kelly, will miss the start of the 2021 season. He tore a pectoral muscle during his training, and he's set to undergo schedule July 9th. Well, that already passed. So hopefully, he gets a speedy recovery. It says approximate healing time is 3 to 5 months.
Yeah, I tweeted this last night. I am very unsettled by the Edmonton comments about the XFL. I'm very much like that. Really, I have had a hard time wearing my Edmonton Elks hat and shirt ever since they came out, and they were so pleased that the XFL talks ended the way that they did. I'm very shaken by that. So I just wanted to put that out there on the podcast. I tweeted it last night.
Pick a new team. Pick a new team.
They might be an XFL team anyway. A couple other retirements. Neela
Casitati?
Casitati. I'm sorry, I have braces now. I couldn't talk before. I really can't talk now. He's retiring. He was proud to be a part of the team. He played 20 games over 2 seasons with the Red. He was in Oklahoma before. I have notes here about all this stuff. But the Stampeders. This is also interesting. They suspended 8 players and they released quarterback Chase Litton.
The Red Blacks did, not the Stampeders.
Sorry, Red Blacks did. I'm going too quick on this one. Red Blacks released Chase Litton, and Chase Litton had famously been a part of the Seattle Dragons as like their 3rd or 4th string quarterback, and he got cut. But he was he was with the Dragons, and he was with the XFL. So there you go. Chase Litton couldn't cut it in the
CFL.
Yep.
This is a big story that I saw from 3 Down Nation. I was like, come on, man, what are we doing? Yep. What are we doing? Because here at the Markcast, we've always said this basic thing: take care of the players. Mm-hmm. We've always been about taking care of the players. Some CFL teams are withholding the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy payments to their players. Apparently, they were supposed to be paid out no later than July 10th. It is now July 15th.
Yep.
What's the latest on this?
I checked. I didn't see anything come out yet. I mean, again, these are like subsidy wages, right? It's kind of like unemployment, but not. I think it's more like those PPP loans that we had down here, where it's filling in those gaps. There was a debate because they wanted to pay the veterans. They didn't know if the rookies fit in all that, right? Because that would make sense, right? Like they're coming in, the rookies. I know like here you had to be, employed for a certain time or have your business before a certain time to get involved in all this stuff. But, it's certainly not. I saw a lot of players tweet out like, CFL doing CFL stuff, it seems like this is pretty typical with that. But no, I did look for an update. I didn't see any resolution from that yet. So I'm sure if there has been resolution, someone will let us know in the YouTube comments.
I think what it boils down to is that, the thought is, well, the TV deal pays for the player's salary. It's like, yeah, in theory it does, but we're in a once in a 100-year pandemic, and if the requirements for these CEWS funds mean they go to your employees and your players, you need to pay them.
Yep.
You can't just be like, well, the TV deal does this. You got to follow the rules.
Yep.
You have to follow the ruls.
Gary Stern, Alouettes owner, we talked about this at the top of the show. He thinks they're going to try to figure out some revenue sharing by the end of the season. Again, it's like these ideas, that from osmosis, talking with the XFL, like, oh, maybe we should do league, revenue sharing. But it's like, well, why didn't we? You could have done that before. There's nothing that was preventing that before. There's nothing that's allowing that now that wasn't allowed previously. So. But obviously they need to rework. I mean, obviously they're getting through this season. Then we need to figure out the business model. But it is interesting that he's still talking about that. And obviously the Alouettes were somewhat high on the XFL. Theoretically with the Toronto.
Stern, with his connection to MLSE, was labeled the most by most an XFL supporter. But now he says since that's closed. They have to get around to, getting together and accepting that the unique game with the 3 downs and wide field, but the revenue needs to be shared. It's a model that works. Other teams and other pro leagues do revenue sharing. It's just something that has to work to make the whole league viable, I should say. Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they're going to have 100% capacity at their home opener. So, and
all the games. It just came out today. Now it sounds like all the games are going to have. That's if you're double vaxxed. Double vaxxed. And if you're getting on your political soapbox, like my choice, my body, and then you're like, well, why are they making us do that? It's like, guys and girls, this is a private entity that can say no. They have the right to refuse service to anyone who doesn't wear their shoes or their shirt or has their vax card. It's very easy. Yep.
Very easy.
Tim Baines was reporting, he was on the show last week that I think it was 2 weeks ago. Sorry, last week was crazy with all the news. Red Blacks are hoping to get 15,000 fans in for August 28th. So I mean, it really sounds like we're really moving there. I think we're gonna slog through, but we're getting there to the season on August 5th. I do feel pretty confident about that.
The Edmonton Elks GM says he thinks it would be easier to answer what hasn't changed in terms of, I guess, their entire
makeup, everything.
Right? Since they got a new name and everything. That's interesting. He gave a season preview. He talked about his new coaching staff, new name, new logo, and a lot of new players. It's a new era in Edmonton, and maybe Reed will be there for that, or maybe not.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting. We have a couple other Edmonton notes. This kind of threw this in here that, basically, they're doing the whole revamp, new coaching staff, all this stuff. A couple things from this, and this is interesting. So they're giving away 35,000 free T-shirts to really sell out the season opener. So if you get a season opener ticket, you get a shirt. And then they're also doing a thing where the big Labor Day rematch with them against Calgary, they're going to do kids get in free. So if you're 17 and under, you get in free. And I, of course, jokingly tweeted like, quote, the CFL is a gate-driven league. We're giving away tickets. But, I mean, these are good ideas, but this is like we got to do 1,800 other of these things. Like, this is good, but this isn't like, oh, we're giving away free T-shirts. Like, this is good, but we need 8 of these stories every week to talk about.
True that. And you need more players that are flipping over backwards, dunking cookies and milk. Paxton Lynch, very excited to be with the Roughriders, but he absolutely wants to return to the NFL. He was a former first-round NFL draft pick with the Broncos. He made his debut at the training camp on Monday. He's making an adjustment from 4 downs to 3 downs, and he says it's very challenging. It's been difficult. A lot of the pre-snap stuff has been a big adjustment for me in terms of getting that snap off as those players are coming to the line. That's something that he's definitely adjusting to. We wish him the best of luck on that.
Yeah, I want to get Murray's takes on that. I mean, it sounds like he thought he would come up to the CFL for like a quick cup of coffee and then head back down south. And it sounds like let's get through a season here and then let's figure that out. And then also and we'll get into all this with Murray too. But Craig Dickinson with the Riders. We're still talking about how he was kind of off all these comments about Paxton Lynch wanting to return and the CFL being tough. He says that the Canadians should be really proud of the CFL, high quality, high caliber, but that doesn't mean that Americans, this is my comment, doesn't mean that Americans can't watch it as well. Americans can also enjoy the Canadian football game. So, yes.
Maybe. And the Roughriders, they're opening up their scrimmage, their green and white scrimmage, to 5,000 fans. They're selling tickets. So there you go. There's a lot of stuff about the Roughriders coming up, and that Reed is going to chat with Murray McCormick on that right after this.
Murray McCormick of the Regina Leader-Post, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. I'm excited to talk Roughriders. I've been looking at a bunch of different notes and things coming out from training camp. First and foremost, how is everything going for you now that we're kind of back finally covering CFL football again?
I have to admit, it's different working 12 to 14-hour days again. I know people will laugh with the pandemic. I was moved over to news for half sports, half news. So I had to work Monday to Fridays, 9 to 5, pretty strict hours. And it's a little different now being in sports in a training camp where it's all football all the time, except for today. All football because I had the day off, all football all the time. So it's been a bit of adjustment working again, but it's been I keep looking around going, geez, I missed it. I really kind of missed having a purpose in life, having something to do, having to do something important and that people are actually going to read. And it's been even sort of doubly important is fans aren't allowed to practice. So the media are really the eyes and the ears of what is going on at training camp. And I don't know if it happens down there as much, but they get between 500 to 1,000 people at a Riders training camp. Not as much during the week, but on the weekend. So there's a pretty big contingent of railbirds watching things and going on. So they've been on us to keep things important. Let's see what's going on and stuff. But the big news is we just got told today that fans will be allowed in the stands on Sunday, which is big news. It's limited to 500. So I'm interested to see that'll fill up pretty quickly because there'll be, I don't know, I think it might keep them away. I think it's supposed to be, I'm not sure if Celsius in Fahrenheit, it's supposed to be 36 Celsius on Sunday, which is, even in Fahrenheit, is smoking hot. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in news, I used to cover the Seahawks here in Seattle, and we would always go cover training camp. And I never really got it, why fans would want to go see all that, right? Because I wasn't the sports guy back. This was years and years ago. And then now, I totally get it, and especially where you're coming from, where the fans want to know, availability is limited, opening up now. So it's really on the responsibility of you all, because even the teams, it's kind of like, well, are they, they're reporting things and we really need to know from the media, like what's happening and like who's looking good, who's looking bad, kind of. So how has it been, the energy and the excitement and everything since you've been able to cover this stuff? Or are you guys doing stuff via Zoom still up there?
Well, we're still doing all the player interviews via Zoom, and it's still going to be that way for quite a while. I'm not quite sure when it'll ever end. And as a journalist, I can honestly say I hate Zooms. I hate Zooms, especially as a reporter, because we're all into the same question pool. So if I may ask a really good question, humbly put in my way, it goes out in the world.
Yep.
It's on the other websites so quickly, usually before I can even get started writing my story, whatever all my questions have asked them. That's very frustrating. But I also understand they're trying to mitigate what's going to happen here. They really want to keep player safety. They want to keep learn that. So the best way to do that is keep an old guy like me breathing all over them. So I guess that's part of the price we have to pay for having this world opened up a little bit. But yeah, Zooms aren't a great way for us. But they also post them all on the team's website. And I hate to admit, it's kind of the old joke. We don't like to let them know how the sausage is made. We just want them to read our stories and interpret how we listen to the quotes and use them to tell our story. We don't want the other people to be telling their story before my story, if that makes any sense.
It does. It's a couple days removed now, but the big story originally coming out from the Riders camp was obviously the injuries last week, the Achilles injuries, all of that. I know that they're looking into that, and was it like an unsanctioned practice? I mean, do you have takeaways from that? Because it was a pretty alarming, just when I read that came out, however it happened, 4 players injured at one time like that's pretty crazy.
Well, I've been in the sports writing business since 1980, so there's a little time. I've seen 1 torn Achilles in that time, and that was when the Riders quarterback in 2015, Darian Durant, in the regular season open, tore his Achilles. So when the first one came in, I went, that's unusual. And then I got a text from a friend that said, Murray, that's not one. There's now 3 other guys have torn their Achilles. And I have to admit, I'm still shocked. I'm still shocked that many Achilles injuries. Like, I probably don't know 4 people who have Achilles injuries. And it's kind of a fairly common, because if you talk to the guys who's happened to, it's a somewhat fairly common injury. But it wasn't an unsanctioned practice. It was a players only practice. And part of the COVID protocols was no coaches were allowed, which was a mistake, because I think if coaches had been allowed, they probably would have stopped it. So that was one thing after that. So the players, and also you have to understand, the players have been locked up, or basically for 2 years, and they haven't had any opportunity. So they're getting a chance going. They had 3 negative COVID tests, so they were allowed on the field. It just was a bigger group than I think. And then they did this drill, throwing a medicine ball into the air, and then they all chased, the 2 of them chased to a spot. Now they say they've done it hundreds of times, and I have never once seen it at a Rider practice. So I don't doubt they've done it hundreds of times. I don't know when they do it 100 times, because I'm at every practice and there's other media people there. So we don't know when this drill was. If I had to offer my doctor's opinion, their Achilles weren't ready for it. For some of the players, because if you probably know football players, and they play basketball in the off season. They go to a gym. They work on making things stronger, and most gyms weren't open. So that opportunity to me, but even then doesn't explain the randomness of it. Doesn't explain 2 anticipated starters, the second overall pick in the draft, and a promising rookie, all going down within 6 minutes with torn Achilles. And I know I'm babbling a little bit, but it was one of the saddest things I saw on the sideline the other day when I looked at us, all 4 of them standing together with their boots on, and thinking, man, like, to wait all this time to get an opportunity to play football, and then to have that happen. And you got to think, for guys like Larry Dean and Freddie Bishop III, they're in their 30s. Is it over? You never know. And the other 2 younger guys, it could be their careers before they even started from the way things happen. So it was I don't like to use tragedy, because COVID-19 changes our definitions of tragedy forever and ever. But it was a tragic, catastrophic thing, and we're going to be writing about it right until December 12th if the Riders are in the Grey Cup. So it's always going to be hanging over the team this year.
Yeah, no, and you're not rambling at all. This is great insights, and yeah, do not worry at all about that. Because it's one of those things where I think the comments had come out a couple of weeks ago from Craig Dickinson about how some of the veterans would be cut, or it was going to be a tough kind of grind to get everybody, because some of these players weren't in shape, right? And a lot of the comments came out, and it's like, well, that's not necessarily even up to these players who have been working and supporting their families and having other jobs and doing other stuff. I mean, it just comes to a point where until you're being paid to play football, you can't devote, the 5-6 hours a day that it needs to be in that shape, right?
Yeah, like, I don't think they were out of shape. I just didn't think they maybe weren't ready. Is that kind of the same thing? And if they say they've done it hundreds of times, I wrote a story, the follow-up story. One of the guys said they'd done it that morning, an hour before, and nobody had any problems. And maybe they've done it all this time and there's never been an issue. But boy, where there's this, like, imagine there's only 2 trainers on the field at the time. So based on my limited experience on what happens with a traumatic injury like an Achilles, there probably 2 of them were working on the first guy who tore his one. The second guy looks up and he's torn his one. Then the third guy tears one, and they had nobody there to really stop, say, okay, sit down. I talked to a trainer. I said, sit down, stop, don't do any more. Let's stop this right now. Till finally, but also in hindsight, looking in the matter of 6 minutes, boy, we've gone. That's not much time for anything. So it's almost like medical triage for these guys, for these trainers. And I really think Craig Dickinson, I don't know how familiar your listeners are with Craig. Craig's a stand-up guy. He's one I've dealt with many coaches over my years, and Craig's really a different guy. He's honest, he's candid, he understands what's going on, and he said a thing. We have to earn the trust of the players back in camp, and I really think they do. And I think somehow someone screwed up, and someone's going to be in trouble. I think the CFLPA sooner or later is going to say something went on this stuff, but for the Riders' sake, they did everything right, except there should have been coaches out there, and they should have stopped, and you wouldn't be losing your starting middle linebacker, their defensive end, Freddie Bishop, to replace Charleston Hughes, who's, right now that position is wide open where it looked almost like it was locked up. So there's still a lot of fallout from that, and there's still going to be some fallout from that, but just a crazy, crazy, crazy day when you're trying to just prep for opening of training camp after 2 years. So it was a bit of a chaotic day.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine waiting all that time, and looking so forward to this as a player and then coming out and having that happen. I want to get your take on, we've been covering this Paxton Lynch, right, coming out, first day saying, okay, maybe I'm not ready for this. I mean, what's your takeaway from the comments he made that, like, I want to go back to the NFL?
Oh, I'd be surprised if he said anything less. Like, you want to go back to the NFL. Come on, let's just guy in that question. Well, I did. So another radio guy says, what kind of dumb questions is McCormick asking? I says, no, you have to ask the guy that because you want to be able to put it in the story what he thinks. And absolutely, this is about going back to the NFL for him. He's only 27. He got put into a position, I think, with the Broncos that he wasn't ready. He should have been a first overall pick? Probably not. Dak Prescott went after him. So maybe they just sort of shouldn't have picked him. He wasn't in a suitable offense and all those things. One of my sports editor, Rob Vanson, was a crazy Broncos fan. So I know way more about the Broncos quarterbacks now than I ever thought I really would know after Peyton Manning and John Elway. But anyway, so I think he got put, and then he comes out here and he was good. It's funny to see, maybe down there in the NFL, you see 6'7" quarterbacks. They don't exist in the CFL. 6'7" quarterbacks. That's defensive end height. That's those type of things, offensive linemen. So it's different to see that tall of a quarterback on the field talking to some of these guys. And I asked him, do you think it's a bit of an advantage to be that tall because the CFL feels wider and it's more of a crowd? And he says, yeah, I might see what happens. He's looking better every day. I have to give him credit for that. The first day, I think he came out of quarantine. He wasn't quite ready. Maybe not quite ready, but just a different game. And he looked better. And he's getting more confident in his passes. And I have to let people know, Cody Fajardo is the starting quarterback for the Roughriders. There's no one else. There's no debate. But there is an opening for a backup. And I think Paxton Lynch could push Isaac Harker, who was a backup last year and led the Riders for that game against Edmonton when they beat them and clinched first base in the home playoff game. So Isaac Harker's has some ability. There's Tom Flacco, and that's Joe Flacco's brother, who's got quite the amazing pass. And Mason Fine, who's a guy who kicked around in Oklahoma and whatnot. I'm sorry, drawing a blank. North Texas Mean Green. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Does that name ring a bell? Okay. So there is a good battle for quarterback, and there's nothing a sports writer loves more than a quarterback controversy at training camp. It's 23 days. We don't want to write about offensive linemen. People want to know about quarterbacks. So more questions about quarterbacks, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Your Zoom earlier on glitched for just a second. So you said you were the one that asked the question to Paxton and got made fun of. What was the question that you asked that brought that out?
I think I asked him, "Do you want to get back to the
Oh.
NFL?" I still don't think it was a bad question. I've asked some not most intelligent questions, but I don't think there's a bad question. It's just that darn Zoom, because you don't get the opportunity. And I'll just give a quick story.
Yeah.
Like, people say to me, a quarterback will say, "Well, I've got 3 kids." And I'll have to ask them how old they are, what's their names and what their kids, which is a pretty basic journalistic question. But you're doing it on Zoom, and now everyone's saying, "Well, why is he trying to write a gossip column?" No, people want to know who's he's got 3 kids, how old they are, and what are their names. So Zoom opens up, as I said, people are finding out how we make the sausage, and they're finding out it's kind of boring, but very tasteful when we get to the end.
But I mean, it seemed like the big comments were that, Paxton Lynch maybe thought he was going to come up here, or not come up, come up to you guys. I'm not up there, but come up to the CFL, do a quick stint, have a cup of coffee, and come back down. And now maybe, people, the comments are like, well, you maybe need to, you got to prove a little bit more here.
I thought it was funny that he didn't know there were 12 guys on the field. And as one guy mentioned, I said, wait till he finds out there's a C in defense, because we spell our words.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty good one. It's an adjustment for guys. And I never once got the impression he's up here for a cup of coffee. He's up here to see what he can do, to prove that he can go back to the States and make a living down there. It may sound funny. In 2017, we went through the Vince Young experiment up here. If you remember Vince Young from the Tennessee Titans and all those things, he came up here his agent happened to be Lee Steinberg, who's the same agent as Paxton Lynch's. So they brought Lynn. They needed a quarterback up here because Darian Durant been traded. So they brought Young up as a guy to see what he could do. And he's another big dude for the CFL, 6'5", I think 230. And I never got to see what Vince Young could do because he tore his hamstring jogging out of bounds during a really innocuous drill. And I always wondered, because I never once saw him unload a pass, try to throw a deep pass or anything. He just kind of kept him under wraps. And so there's a lot of comparisons made to Paxton Lynch and Vince Young. But in a way, I feel it's a little unfair towards Paxton because he's only 27. Vince was 34 by the time he was. Paxton was, during the one time I've talked to him, was very candid. It was a good interview. Vince was always they had a big press conference. I remember they signed him in February before he came up here. That back in the day when we had press conferences, that he seemed okay with the idea, but I don't think he was. I think once he got up here, he realized that it's not something he wanted to do and how much work it was. Training camp's tough on older guys, I think, and not just the work, just being away from families and doing those kind of things. So I always wondered what Vince could have done, and I'll always wonder that. I'll retire, and whenever I retire, and keep thinking, remember that I would have liked to have seen what Vince Young could have contributed, maybe done in the CFL. But there's a long list of American quarterbacks who have come up here and haven't done squat. Like, I'm not saying there's a long list of American quarterbacks who have done great stuff, because most of the quarterbacks tend to be all Americans, but there's a high profile. We had Graham Harrell up here. Remember him from Texas? He was here for a while before he went down to Green Bay. Tony Rice, go way back to the Notre Dame days. I'm just thinking of the ones off the top of my head since I've been around here. And there's always been, and they just come up and they don't adjust because it's a whole different game. And it's not saying they aren't any good. It's just saying that 12 players on the field, 3 downs, a 20-second time clock. You try changing you go from 45 to 20 seconds. It's a huge adjustment for the American guys.
Yeah, well, and that segues into my next comment, because Craig Dickinson had come out and talked about, the CFL and how, people should be really proud of the game, right, and proud of the high caliber of it. Obviously that segues from the Paxton Lynch comments, right, where I think Dave Naylor had a whole big tweet stream this week about all the other, like you're mentioning, these American, quarterbacks that come up and can't. And I mean, it is just those. I mean, it's these major differences in the game, but then, the effects of, the field size, the effect of the players on the field with the pre-motion. I mean, it's so much to adjust to. And then do you think the game is just that much more challenging too for these players to get used to?
I think it is. But I also have to mention, there's a lot of quarterbacks that no one's ever heard of who come up here and do great things. Cody Fajardo, Bo Levi Mitchell, Mike O'Reilly, Damon Allen. I could list names and names of American quarterbacks who didn't play for big time programs, but came up here and have really been successful. So the quarterbacks can make the adjustment. It just seems to be maybe there's more focus on these big name guys that people are saying, yeah, like, as we say with Paxton Lynch, who's because he was a former first rounder, maybe there's more attention on them and there's more pressure on them to really step up. So it's not fair to say that American quarterbacks can't come up here and adjust. It just seems to be the big names have problems with adjusting. And I touched upon the differences, and they are differences. And I also think they find out that the Canadian football athlete is a pretty good athlete. They're faster. I think they're not as big. They're a little leaner, and they can cover the field, and they know how to play. Some of these guys have been around a while. And I think the Americans find out, there are athletes in the CFL. These aren't just a bunch of Eskimos who managed to suit up to come play football. There's some good athletes in this game. And I'm 100%, Craig, I'm a very proud Canadian. I'm very proud of the fact that, I get to cover the CFL, and it's full of Canadians, and the Canadian is struggling some days. We get some, the XFL talk, there's a lot of discussion about taking the Canadian out of the Canadian Football League, but it's a great league, a lot of fun. People watch it and they get into it. They're going to see a lot of good games. That's probably one of the best parts of the CFL.
I want to ask you about Dion Lacey too, but I wanted to just, as you mentioned it, I mean, do you have any thoughts about the ending of the talks between the leagues? I mean, we didn't have you on in the time where presumably the talks could have been continuing today while we had you on, but it just ended up that the timing, worked out. Any thoughts about both leagues deciding to move on?
There's a lot of talk about a lot of talk about a lot of talk. I was really underwhelmed by the whole thing. I remember when the media release came out, I sent it to my boss, Rob Vanstone. I said, what the heck does this mean? Because it was just like a line of saying the CFL and the XFL are doing this, and then 3 sets of quotes. And I said, well, what does this mean? And it filled a lot of dead time during a lot of dead time for a lot of people. And I think the best thing has happened right now. The CFL needed to get that cleaned up before we open training camp, and let's keep the focus on training camp and what's going ahead. Because I know as a reporter, I'd be asking questions about the XFL to almost every guy. It was just because the players want opportunities to be seen, and the XFL would provide bigger opportunities to be seen. Another part with the CFL, and it probably does, I don't know if they mentioned, the CFL is pretty well tapped into every financial source of money it can in Canada. There's no other ways. We don't have the big sponsors. We don't have all these things that you might have in the Americas. So they're trying to find ways to get resourceful, to get money. That Global 2.0, where they're bringing in players from Mexico and Europe and stuff, is a way to expand the league and bring in some extra money. So the CFL is trying to find ways to expand its market and to bring revenue in. And I don't fault them for that. Check it out. I'm glad it's over with. I hope, as I said before, I'm closer to retirement. So I hope it's gone before I ever retire, till I retire. So yeah, I wasn't overly excited about it. Sometimes I forget all about it. So that's not a bad day.
Yeah, I don't believe that anyone was forgetting about it while it happened. I want to talk about Dion Lacey. He had got pulled off. The COVID came back on, and I guess to me, first off, updates on that. If you have any, but then second, I think it just raises more questions because I don't think it was Craig. I think it was the GM that was asked, about it, and the line was like, we're supposed to have something to say about this with the protocols, but I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be. Or I can't remember the quote that was in there. So any updates on Dion, and then just overall that whole, we have to be very transparent about what is happening right now. And the CFL isn't always as transparent about injuries and things like that.
That's a big thing. Dion Lacey was back on the field today. Basically, it was a false positive test. And the CFL announced they did 6,000 tests, I think, in the neighborhood, getting ready for training camp. And they had 10 false positive tests. So they haven't had a positive test. It's just part of the protocols. If a guy tests positive, he has to go into quarantine. Lacey felt fine, and he was back on the field at middle linebacker for a little while today, which is interesting because I thought for sure he was a star will with the Eskimos, just an absolute stud back in the day when he played there, which is back to 2016. So, yeah, I think it was Craig who mentioned I shouldn't be saying that. And I think I'm willing to give guys in this position a little bit more latitude because we're learning as we go along. This is all new. The NHL guys have gone through this whole process in hockey, but we're going through the first time as football reporters. And I'm willing to give Craig some room on that. Let him, he shouldn't be talking. If he shouldn't be talking about it, he shouldn't be talking about it. But I tried to find out what COVID protocols meant. And I wasn't able to find it out until the CFL came with this this memo today about the test. So now I know what it means. And there's going to be others. And someone's going to test positive and be positive. I'm positive about that, if I can as positive about anything as I can be. So it's going to happen. And hopefully it doesn't run rampant through a team, because the CFL, I don't think it can be schedulable games, or, well, there's some room to move things around a little bit. But it happened in the NFL, it happens in the NBA, it happened in hockey. Fortunately, I don't know how many Roughriders are vaccinated. That's a big question that is once again deemed a privacy matter. I think it should be released. I think we should know how many guys are vaccinated, because we know how I don't want to go on my rant, but we know how important being vaccinated is when you see the numbers. So as an older person, I'll say I've been double vaxxed, and I feel a whole much better for it, and I get to see my grandkids. So that's so there's many advantages. I know that's not related to football, but it's the world now, isn't it?
I think last question for me today is, we're moving towards home opener, right? I think the numbers, right, look good for Saskatchewan, right? We're going to be having, full crowds, right, for home opener. I mean, any thoughts looking forward to the season here once we get past training camp?
Bring it on, because people don't know training camp is a bit of a grind, and I know for the players and for us too. So let's bring on training camp. I would think, and someone asked me today what I thought about the Roughriders, and I thought before the Achilles catastrophe, they were in a good position to make a run for first place. Larry Dean is an outstanding middle linebacker, and Freddie Bishop third. He played on a bad Toronto defensive line last year, but I think he can get more 6 sacks. Now I'm a little less certain that they can get that first place. I think they're going to be a playoff team, and I think it's going to take them a little while to settle down too, because it's only 14 games, but it's going to take a couple games for guys, because they haven't played. There's no preseason games. I know the NFL went straight in. I think the NFL went straight from the regular practice, and they got away with it. But it's going to be some sloppiness, because the NFL guys are making a lot more money to train and to work out than the Canadian guys are at the time. So I think I'm looking forward to the season started. I have to admit, the Riders open against the BC Lions on August 6th. And if you don't have a few tears, I don't think you're human. I think we can all look at what happened in the last year and a half, what we've gone through, the friends we've lost, the people who've gotten sick, and I think it's all going to be part of a football game that's, regardless of all the politicization of masks and whatnot, it's going to be an emotional day, even for an old sports writer like myself. I think I lost 2 good friends to COVID, so I know I'm going to be thinking about them when the ball kicks off, and they would have made the game. So it's going to be, it's not quite football, but it's going to be football, hopefully.
Well, Murray, I really appreciate your time today, scheduling. I know it's busy with you Riders and covering everything and getting back into the swing. Hopefully we can have you back on sometime during the season and talk about the Riders again. And again, it's so important for us, down here in the States, to have people that are doing the Lord's work up there covering everything. But I mean it, right? To be able to provide access right down south to a lot of us, to be able to get that information out is very much appreciated. And I want to thank you very much for the work that you're doing.
Well, I love talking, and I love talking football, and I love selling the market. I'm not saying I'm biased. I cover the league. I've been on the Rider beat since 2008, so we do when to criticize them or not. But we also grew up loving the CFL. I have CFL memories. I could tell your listeners for many years of a guy growing up watching CFL. So it's a big part of our lives, and I think people need to know more about it. And it's not a bad idea to let people know that they're. Paxton Lynch comes up here, Yahoo, good for him. But we have a lot of other guys that are up here that are making a bit of a living, been doing that for quite a while, and I'll see some good players. So hopefully they'll tune in. That's a better word.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, and best of luck for the season.
No problem. Do it again.
Welcome back. Want to thank Murray for his time, chatting about Roughriders training camp and everything going forward with the Roughriders. Cool.
Now we are in the XFL section now. We did a little bit with the XFL Argos here, and I want to really get your thoughts on this now. You listened to Mike Mitchell's interview last week. You were at the
three times
on normal speed. I heard you say, because you wanted to process everything. You were at the hospital, couldn't attend. takeaways from Mike Mitchell's interview, and then I really want to talk on this international thing. But any big picture takes from Mike Mitchell's interview?
Mike is very well versed, and Mike probably is the one person that if he says something, it's pretty much gospel. His inside track record, his connections are, second to none. So when I heard a lot of the stuff he was saying, there's a narrative that was being pushed by the CFL community that basically made everyone feel like the CFL was the one pulling the plug here. And once you hear Mike Mitchell in a non-emotional fashion explain what's been going on, you realize that it was a situation where it was like a mutual breakup. It's not you, it's not me, it's both of us that we're just not, on the same page. Where, the biggest thing that I always brought up was like, well, the XFL owns all their teams and the CFL doesn't own their teams necessarily. So what do we do about that? That was the big thing that I was like, well, either the XFL is going to have to like sell franchises or the CFL is going to have to own all their franchises. How is that going to work? Yeah. And then, his glaring thing that he was talking about was how the XFL put the I guess thought out there about international.
Yes. And so one of the taglines for the show today, besides, is going to be, the XFL to Canada and Mexico. Now, we talked about, Canada a little bit at the top. There's been talks about the XFL shifting their schedule from February to, from February, whatever, to April to June, right? That would obviously be more, amenable to the Canadian, weather and fans and all those things. We heard about, we can't play football in February here. So, it's still going to be cold, but it's better than February. Any other thoughts on the Canada thing? I think it's a terrible idea to go to Toronto as an XFL franchise. I really do.
I think it depends on what they do in terms of, yeah. I guess what I want to kind of get through and help everybody realizes this is that Canada doesn't have a trademark on the stuff they use, the rules they use to play football. What if the XFL rolls out a new rule book and they're 3 downs and they're doing multiple movements at the line? What happens then? What happens if the XFL starts already suiting their game so they can look at Canada and go, okay, we'll just put a team in Toronto and call it good. What if, and it's just this complete speculation, but what if, the XFL does things to get maybe the Canadian fan base interested anyway? It's going to be interesting.
My fear is, and again, we're not getting into all the online, not going to name names right now, but there's a lot of, upsetness with the XFL, CFL, all that. I see them not supporting the XFL team out of spite. I really do. I think there's enough of a vocal, and I know it's a minority, the people that are online, but I do think there's enough of really upset because of all this that they're just like, screw it. Like we're not doing that. Like we're not going to be a part of that. And that, I could just see them doing that and being like, screw this. Like, we don't want to be involved and we don't want to have any part of that and revolting against that.
I mean, it all depends on if they do that at first and the new Toronto XFL franchise, assuming they get one, starts winning. Don't be at the parade when they win the whole thing. Just a thought. Interesting.
What do you think about the expansion to Mexico?
Great idea. The product is super hot down there. I mean, every time the NFL plays games in Mexico City, even though the air in Mexico City is just horrendous. It is so bad. But every time they go play down there, it's pretty much a sellout. People in Mexico love our game. So I think that is a more profitable venture to go to Mexico than it would be to go to Canada. I do.
I just think they've so botched this, and both sides, but the XFL, if they're the ones trying to expand, with this lack of communication, letting all this just spiral for the last 4 months, I think they've really shot themselves in the foot with this, where if they would have come out and been a little bit more transparent about what wasn't happening, we're just like, we're trying to figure out social media, whatever the business plans were, marketing ideas. I think that and maybe in a year, it's a little less toxic, but I mean, I feel like it's so toxic to go north. I think that, you move one of the teams from Texas down to Mexico, or you add a 9 team. I know, they're talking. Mike on the interview talked about either keeping the 8 and relocating, or adding 2 and expanding. I would still get through one season of U.S. team-based football before we deal with any of this. But again, they got grand plans. And I said on the Third Down Gamble podcast this week, these plans might be too grand. They really might.
Yep, I agree. Little bit of a clickbait article. Sorry, Josh, it is a little bit of a clickbait article. Could Canada dust off the Canadian Football Act to stop an XFL invasion? I read the article. I was like, that's a lot of conjecture, a lot of speculation, a lot of legal stuff that could be considered, antitrust violations, basically. I don't know how businesses work there up in Canada, but I do think that this is very speculative and very reaching. This article's very reaching.
My comment with this is we got to write articles, right? Got to write articles. You don't got to read them. I mean, I didn't write it, but Josh has got to write articles. So like, I don't hate the article. I was part of the discussion when the creation of this article came about, right? In the XFL News Hub chat. I don't,
which I don't belong to. I don't belong to that, by the way. I've never been on that.
It's a lot, but it's a lot. I don't. I get it. I get it. And what I don't like is the negative comments. Then don't read it. Then don't read it. I mean, that's where I'm at. It's the same with us and the CFL. Like, then don't listen or don't watch. I mean, I mean, the XFL, the wording of that, I get it. It's trying to be hyperbole, kind of, clickbaity, but it does seem like there are things in place that have been brought up before with the World Football League expanding to Toronto, that they didn't want to deal with that. And anyway, for people that didn't read the article, it's on xflnewshub.com, but it's talking about how back in the 70s, that the World Football League was trying to expand, and that they went about trying to create this bill that would prevent any teams that would play directly opposing to the CFL from coming into Canada. And it never got signed into law. But the idea is like, well, maybe if the CFL was really against an XFL expansion, that they could kind of dust this off. That's what, just the context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in the article, Josh mistakenly uses the word ironically. Stop using it that way. He says that Toronto is one of the 3 cities opposing to the bill, along with Vancouver and Montreal, which of course are the big 3 cities where a team from American sports could definitely succeed. So really need to work on that ironically usage there. Just my suggestion. The XFL and the Houston Astros likely to settle for the H trademark issues. Screw the Astros. They're entering settlement talks, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, they're going to settle. It sounds like they're going to, there was a big trademark that I mean, again, I'm like, the XFL, I would not fight any of these right now. I wouldn't fight I wouldn't fight the MAM logo. I wouldn't fight the oil tower. I wouldn't fight any of this stuff right now.
There's a player that's 4'11" hitting home runs against the Yankees to walk it off. I mean, who's got bad tattoos. Oh wait, no, he's shy. Oh wait, no, his wife gets mad. Oh wait, no, it's just, I hate the Astros so much.
Just the last couple of things. I don't want to get too getting down on 3 down. This was interesting to me that they on John Hodges Monday morning, and they've officially unfollowed us now. I don't know if that's because they didn't block us this time, but I don't know if it's like we're done with the XFL, or if it was our comments last week kind of making fun of Hodge and Dunk. But this is just my take on this. This is not 3 down, whatever. We know how anti-XFL 3 down nation has been the last 4 months. This is a fact, right? On the Monday morning mailbag today, or this week, they were asking him about the talks ending. And Hodges' take was, to be frank, I'm not really, the question was like, did the XFL take a lot of business ideas from the CFL? And he goes, to be frank, I'm not really sure what type of business practices the XFL could steal. The CFL's business model is outdated, which is part of the reason why a potential partnership was in the first place. The XFL did a better job monetizing their fans in 2020, engaging with them in creative ways. The league's on-field product was mediocre at best, but the games were dressed up in fun and engaging packages. Their presence on social media, all these good things. He actually thinks that the CFL had more to gain from the XFL than the other way around. And so I'm like, so then why crap?
Why now?
I don't get that. I don't get that at all. Isn't that weird?
It's like double talk. Like you were sitting there like, you had your like little pro wrestling gimmick. You were like the savior of 3-down football. And now that, now that the kayfabe curtain is gone, now you could be like, well, in actuality.
Right? That's totally what
I mean,
it's just weird. I just don't get that. I'm like,
pick a side. Either you are full board on your knees for the CFL, or you're not.
Well, or
I think this is the best thing that Hodge has said that I've read, where it's like, okay, you see the problems, then why were you so against it to begin with?
That's the thing is, I just don't get the hate. I can get, we're protecting, we're like, but this like hatred, and then to come out with this like the week after, I was like, is this? I mean, was Hodge abducted by Mark Perry? Like, did Mark Perry write this? I just couldn't believe that. They had a couple of quotes. We don't need to read all these, but basically it was like they have their insider quotes. One person believes the XFL talks are totally dead. If they're not dead, they're 99% dead. Why would the CFL put this out? The other one was, I don't think the XFL business is over at all. With the shortened schedule and limited attendance, those in favor of a collaboration or merger are going to have a stronger argument. The sweeping change is needed. Randy Ambrosie staked his reputation on this division. If he's still commissioner in 6 months, I think this XFL stuff heats back up again. Again, I don't think this is going away. I think all these people are like, we're done, we're moving on. And I don't, right?
I don't see it like, I see it paused.
Yeah.
You paused the tape. You didn't stop it completely and take the tape out and throw the tape in the trash. Sorry, cassette tape for those millennial kids this is what we used to listen to our music on. I just don't think that this is over yet. And I'm not saying that like it's going to happen the way we want it to happen or the way you want it to happen. I just don't think it's over in terms of you guys are really still pissed at Randy Ambrosie. You guys really still don't like him. And if this doesn't turn things around, MLSC is going to be even more like, hey, guys, we need a solution here. We need to make more money. We're losing more money. We're losing more money. And Montreal's going to be like, yeah, we're losing more money. We're losing more money. And Vancouver's going to be like, yeah, BC's losing more money. That's 33% of your league right there. That's going to start complaining about losing money. Just saying.
It's just none of this stuff goes away, right? We all live in this. And it's kind of like when we covered the spring league back last November and then like, remember the COVID and the brow break and all this stuff. Brian Woods came on and it was like, wow, that was crazy. But then like, spring league comes back and now it's like the USFL and now it's all these things. Like this is not going away. Right. So I hate to like break that news to all these people that are like, I mean, again, very vulgar things I saw online today in regards to a lot of these talks. And, I mean, we ain't going anywhere, and I don't think a lot of this stuff is going anywhere. So,
speaking of going somewhere, the new Washington football team is going to have a name. Sorry, Reed.
This is the dumbest thing ever.
It's not. It's not.
They said they're going to come up with a new name, so that means they're going to get through one more season, right? They're unveiling the new name and logo in early 2022. So, I would presumably after the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And
probably.
then, or if they lose, then they get, when they.
No, I think they'll wait till after the Super Bowl. They'll want all the attention, and they won't do it like the Monday after the Super Bowl. They'll wait a couple weeks after the Super Bowl, and then they'll roll it out. I'm thinking probably March, probably the beginning of March, the first Monday in March, they'll roll out the new name. So.
I saw someone I think commented on one of the YouTube like the Potomac football team or something. Like I love, and there's so many people. I love the Washington football team. I love WFT. I love that. I love Washington. It's okay. Like in soccer, you got 1,800, Portland football team and the London football team. Without like in the NFL, it's okay to have one football team.
It's not Portland football team. It's the Portland Timbers. But they still have a nickname.
Some of the teams in MLS have
LAFC, Los Angeles former Chivas. That's what we call them. Chivas 2.0. Your homophobic chants still linger from your Chivas days. Real classy bunch there down there at LAFC. Austin FC. There's another team that has the FC. So they had to get a name, man. I'm sorry, hate to break it to you.
All right. We're going to, Hal, we have there's kind of a little speculation with this USFL stuff. So if you're interested in the USFL stuff, stick tuned after the break. But I do think this is a really great chat with Hal Mumme, coach, or I guess you call him. Is it like a president? Do you have to, like, if you're a coach, is it always Coach Mumme?
Yeah.
Got to call him Hal? No, I mean, it's always President Barack Obama, right? You can't just call him Barack.
Just always call him Coach.
Okay.
And we'll have that after the break.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Reed. I'm with the Markcast. We cover, Spring League and XFL and all sorts of other alternative football. I will say when Coach Mumme, when I announced that you were coming on today, tremendous support and interest and questions from our listeners. I really appreciate you taking the time. It does mean a lot to the people that listen to our show.
Well, sure. I'm happy to do it.
What has life been like for you the last couple weeks? I know we're a little removed from the big Mega Bowl championship game. What has life been like for you?
Well, I'm working on I'm tutoring some guys here in the Dallas area and some quarterbacks and receivers. So I've been kind of kicking back and taking it easy after living in a hotel suite in Indianapolis for 8 weeks. It's been fun to be back home and cook our own meals and stuff. But we have been doing a little tutoring, and then next week I'm going to the beach for a little vacation.
A well-deserved vacation after a championship run. What was your experience like in Indianapolis? First off, how did that come about, you getting asked to be involved in the league?
Well, Brian Woods is the CEO of that league, and he called me on about around the middle of April 15th, I believe, and asked me if I'd do it. He had offered it to June Jones, but June was in Honolulu and didn't want to spend 2 months in Indianapolis. So he recommended me. And so then Brian called me and told me all about it. And I said, sure, we'll come do that.
Is that something that, as a coach and someone that works with players, does that get you really excited to go into a league like that and get to, maybe scout some new talent and work with some younger talent?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we did see a lot of talent and a lot of people maybe for the future. And the neat thing about those players was they were all kind of guys that got caught in the 2019, played their senior season, and then the virus hit, and they didn't have a chance to have a pro day or any tryouts or anything like that. And then the NFL cut back their rosters. And so free agents were, you pretty much had to already be in the league in order to get signed. So all these guys were guys that deserved a chance, but really didn't get one that year. And so then this gave them some, it gave them six or seven real good films.
Talk about the quality of the talent that was in that league that you got to work with. Specifically on the linemen, but obviously you got to see some of the other teams as well. Talk about the level of player that was involved in the spring league.
Well, I talked to Jerry Glanville when I got in that league, and he had done it. He had been doing it. He had a team called the Conquerors. And he said, it's the most fun you'll ever have. He said, these guys hit harder than anybody you've ever been around. And he was pretty much right. They're all out there playing for a chance. And I know Jerry's already signed 6 guys just to the Chargers alone. We've signed 3 to Canada, and we're hoping to get some more here soon. But I think the level of play was really good, probably on par with the XFL or Canadian football, that sort of thing. And then there's occasionally guys that are going to get signed by the NFL.
So we had Stan Bedwell on our show as well earlier on in the season. What was the process like for bringing him in as one of the QB coaches? And tell me about that, because Stan is a tremendous fellow as well.
Well, he is, and I've worked with him before. He's really knowledgeable. He's really bright. He is the all-time leading passer in Europe, and probably spent about 3 decades over there playing quarterback. So when Brian gave me the team, he said, I'm giving you a pool of players, but you don't have to keep any of them. Well, of course, the first guy I looked at was the quarterback, and it was Ryan Willis. And I could tell he had played at Kansas, which means they had been running air raid there when he was there. So he knew about it. And then he did a great job at Virginia Tech, but he unfortunately got hurt his senior year. And then the virus hit. So he's the perfect example of what I was talking about a while ago. So I thought, well, who do I need to get to be the backup quarterback? And then it dawned on me that, well, if I bring Stan in as the backup quarterback, he'll end up rooming with Brian and he'll coach him up all day long. So that's what we did. And I think there was a lot of skepticism at first about bringing a 36-year-old guy who's 5'9" to be the backup quarterback. But Stan we got way ahead of one team, and he got about a quarter of play or so, and did a real nice job through a touchdown pass. So he made us look good. But the main thing he did was he held for extra points, and he was constantly talking to Ryan Willis, and I think that accelerated the learning curve for Ryan in our offense.
So one of our listeners from the Fourth and Long podcast, they had asked that too. Did you just decide to go with Willis the whole time? I mean, was that a conscious choice to not have another, because in the spring league, a lot of the teams would have two QBs that they would kind of swap out, half and half.
Yeah, I wanted to just have one guy. So I knew Ryan would respond well to Stan, and I knew Stan would be on board with, just being the backup and basically being a player coach.
Do you think that I know that there were some questions in the championship game about with Luis Perez and the Jousters, and maybe he should have been put back in or whatever. Do you think it was easier with you having that one quarterback in Ryan the whole time, that you really got to get in that sync the whole season? I mean, and then the championship game as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it's always difficult to split reps, and at any level, and at the professional level, it's really difficult, and because you just don't have that many practice reps during the week. And I think going with Ryan full time really helped us. It helped us develop a lot of chemistry with our receivers.
Going into that the championship game, obviously a win came down to the wire. What was it like being winning that big mega bowl? Is it more for the players at that point? What is it like to be the championship winning team of the Spring League 2021?
Well, we had a unique team. I think those guys really bonded, and we were all living in the same hotel there together for 8 weeks, and they saw each other all the time. There's a lot of room for people to hate each other, but our guys responded. They liked each other. They hung around with each other. They partied after games with each other. I just think they bonded pretty well. And so it was a really pleasant experience for us. I don't think that's always true in that situation, but our guys were a unique group. And so winning it was, I can truly say that championship game, there was just one focus, and that was just to get the trophy. And there wasn't a lot of selfish people on that team. In fact, there wasn't any that I know of.
As someone, and obviously Brian Woods is in the news as well with kind of all this USFL stuff. He brought you in. What's the relationship like there? What are your thoughts with Brian now as he kind of continues on this next path?
Oh, well, I think it's a brilliant move for him to do what he's doing, and I certainly would like to be part of it. And we've got a good relationship.
Did that news come as a shock to you during the season with all the news of the USFL relaunch?
He told us when we got there that there was some exciting things coming down the pipe that would be announced, but he didn't tell us what. And Brian's a good poker player. He keeps his cards really close to the vest. And so we're all kind of sitting there going, well, I wonder what he's talking about, And then when he made the announcement about the USFL, I thought that was just brilliant to bring back those logos and those team names. And the USFL, probably of all these leagues, had the best run and the best nostalgic feeling about it.
Do you think that there's enough goodwill and nostalgia there to help? It's a crowded landscape now. Obviously, XFL is pushed now to 2023. Does that seem more intriguing of a place to wind up as a player or as a coach than to wait around for whatever Danny and company is going to do with XFL?
Oh yeah, I want to do the USFL.
Have you heard it all from Danny and the Rock or any of those people?
No.
So we had a lot of questions from our listeners, and some of these are a little funnier and some of these are a little more serious. So hopefully we can bounce around with these. Kenny Stevenson, longtime friend of the show, and this is something that we've talked about a lot. Because obviously us in podcasts, we watch the games, watch you all the way back in the XFL, we watch the Spring League, watch all these things. What is the story behind the towel that you wear during the games? Kenny says, why towels?
That's always the first question I get. Well, I'll tell you, I always had a towel around because I have really bad sinuses and I sweat a lot. And so I would keep one around. Well, when I got the job at the University of Kentucky, they noticed that. Obviously, the SEC is a fishbowl. Everything you do gets scrutinized. And so they came to me after the first season there and said, we'd like to have Hal towels, and Nike wanted to do that. So I said, okay, I'll do it as long as we can give the money to charity. Well, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to keep the money. So a local hospital there, my ex-wife, June, had breast cancer, and she was going through treatment. And so I worked with one of the hospitals there in town, and they did it, and they created these Hal towels, and they paid this young lady to stand on the sidelines, and all she did was every time I put the towel down, she put it back on my shoulder. So after a while, I mean, it didn't take very long in the SEC. You just got all these pictures and video of me wearing a towel around my neck. So when I left there after 4 years, and I sat out a year because the NCAA stuff, and then I got the job restarting the program at Southeast Louisiana. And I thought, well, the one good thing is maybe I can get rid of this whole towel program and go back to doing what I used to do. So we had the press conference to announce me as the head coach at Southeast Louisiana. I walk in the room, there's like 400 people all waving towels, yellow towels at me. So I thought, well, I may as well just buy into it. So I just owned it.
That's good. Jake Henry he asked, how's the leg? We all watched your traumatic incident the springtime last year. How's the leg healing up?
Oh, it healed up pretty nicely. It was, the hardest part was I broke the bursa sac, which caused all this swelling. And that was really, really pretty bad for about a month. And then the fracture was actually just a hairline of the top of the tibia. So it healed up on its own pretty nicely.
Listener Seth said, run or pass?
Well, a pass, of course.
Kevin, longtime friend, he says, should the Chargers be like you and run their offense through Donald Parham?
Well, if I had Donald Parham, I'm not going to try and second guess the Chargers. I couldn't even tell you who's coaching them, but I do think Parham is a weapon. And the great thing about Donald is Donald knows where the end zone is, and he is a guy who can score. I mean, you see a lot of big guys like him, but sometimes you get them down in the red zone, and they just aren't as effective as you would expect them to be. But Donald's not like that. I mean, he gets in the red zone, his eyes light.
Alden wants to know, I guess, any players that you've worked with, in this recent iteration of the Spring League, if the USFL, whatever the next Spring League that launches, potentially that you're involved in, any players that maybe Ryan Willis, any other players that you would be interested in seeing hop over, people that you've worked with in the Spring League?
Oh, well, I told that whole team that if I got a job, they were going to get a shot. So I'd like to work with all of them. They all did a great job. They all had different roles. Some of them more talented than others, but the thing they did so well is they played as a team. And but there are some standout guys. You just mentioned Willis. He's one for sure. I think Isaac Zico, our wide receiver, and Ben Putnam, our slot receiver, are two that come to mind. Both of our running backs were very effective. When they walk through the door, most NFL guys aren't going to like them. They look like the team manager or something, But they're both quick. They've got burst. They're courageous. They'll block in every situation, and they really have a knack for finding the running lanes, whether it's catching a ball or running the lead draw or running the counter play.
I was excited, specifically a friend of the show, Cole Boozer, that was one of the linemen on the linemen. He got signed to the Alouettes, during the season. What, was that, I guess, exciting to know that there were obviously eyeballs on what you all were doing, that even in the midst of the season that they were signing players and talent up north?
Yeah, I think so. And I was happy for Cole. He got a good contract, and we wished him well and gave him the game ball after our last game with him.
That's nice. And then fourth and long had one other, you were involved in the XFL, for the 5 weeks, the TSL, for the, 6 weeks. What would be the similar quality of players between the leagues, similar quality of talent? How would you, similar time frame in both of those leagues?
The XFL got cut off. It should have been twice as long as it was. the spring league, I think, for what it was trying to accomplish, it was just about right. I mean, the basic idea was that the players get film, and so 6 games is plenty for that. And it gave us a chance to play everybody, give everybody a chance to shine, and then getting to one more game in the championship game, then being featured on Fox, I think helped some of them. I know we had a DB sign right after the championship game. So I think that's about the right deal. I think they bring back a spring league where you have real franchises in real cities and hopefully real people sitting in the stands instead of fake crowd noise. It'll be a little different situation, but I think the quality play will be like the spring league or better.
Was that weird playing with no fans, kind of in that isolated? Huge stadium too.
Yeah, you get used to it after a while. And I've coached a lot of small college football, so we're used to playing in front of nobody.
I always remember, I think they asked Bill Belichick, the first game, whatever, last year with the Patriots. He's like, it's like practice. It's the same. There's not that much difference in playing, a practice versus playing. Last questions, just moving on. I mean, obviously excited for whatever comes with Brian Woods and company in the future. Any other plans you have going forward here in the next 6-9 months?
No, not really. We're doing some clinics and stuff like that. Our air raid certified deal, I'm work on that a little bit every day. And so, we can, we're just going to continue that and see what the next adventure is going to be.
Well, I think hopefully in high demand here, as the winning coach of the spring league, and obviously putting together a good team, and a lot of visibility. They had a good viewership, throughout the season. Roughly 400,000 people each game on Fox. Yeah. I mean, you feel like overall your time in the spring league was a success.
Yeah, I think it was a success for the whole league, not just me and our players. I think everybody put on a good show, even the teams that didn't win as much. They still, all the games were close games, and there was very few blowouts. Most of them were, like all our last 4 in a row were all come from 2 scores down in the fourth quarter. So it was a lot of fun to watch, and look forward to doing it again.
Perfect. Again, Coach Mumme, thank you so much for your time. I know that people will be excited to hear from you, and I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your morning to do this.
Appreciate it, Reed. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.
Welcome back. Want to thank Hal for his time and talking all the USFL stuff, the spring league stuff, all that stuff. All that stuff.
Yeah, just 2 notes for you, Paul, just so you Hal is very much interested in the USFL here next year. I think he's very close with Brian Woods. He said on the interview. Also, I asked him, have you been approached by Danny and The Rock, Redbird, any of those people at all? He said no.
Okay.
So
moving on to more USFL news real quick. Former San Antonio gunslinger wants to bring a USFL team to the Alamo City. Jim Bob Morris, that's a Texas name.
Right.
Wants to, hung up his first call with an executive from the USFL regarding a potential role in the 2022 startup, and he wants to bring a team to San Antonio.
Yeah, the speculation with this, right? So Jim Bob Morris was San Antonio gunslinger. He's now is like a multimillionaire. He's with Morris Packaging. He was a former safety with the Gunslingers in the 80s. And what's interesting about this is not only that Jim Bob would be somewhat involved, right? And he had a coach that he was talking about bringing on. Did I include that in the did I not include that in the thing? This was like a paywalled article. Anyway, he's coming on, but the idea is that you would be involving other people owning these leagues, right? Because the question was like, where's Brian Woods going to be coming up with all this capital? And the idea would be that maybe they're bringing in owners like this, like Jim Bob Morris to own one of these teams. What do you think about Brian Woods relying on private owners with these teams?
I think it's a good way to bring in revenue. If you sell these franchises to private owners, you're bringing revenue in for the league. That's what's going to happen in the NBA. Like I'm breaking it to you now. All Seattle's getting an expansion team within the next 4 years because the NBA is going to have to offset their COVID losses. This is a way to bring in revenue. I like the idea completely.
And the idea, former Gunslingers quarterback Rick Neuheisel would be the coach. That was the speculation with that.
That's terrible news. Moving on to fan-controlled football, nothing there. ELF All-Star game happening. The U.S. players against, I guess, the other players from around the world on October 3rd.
Yeah, this exciting. If you want your elf stuff, I guess they're going to have an all-star elf squad, and then they're going to get like a hodgepodge of U.S. players not in elf, like maybe some ex-Pac-12 guys that are going to be involved in that. It seems really weird, but people seem to oddly excited about that. So I don't really get the excitement about a random collection of players playing against a random collection of elf players, but that's that. But then in this Instagram live where they kind of announced and talked about all this stuff, they said that in Germany alone, 500,000 people are watching elf every week. And that is, I said, listener Max sent that over. I said, but nobody cares about spring football. So that is an accurate statement.
No one cares about spring football. That's why we have a podcast. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining us this week, all our guests. Again, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's really crucial. We're giving away at 1,500 subscriptions. We're giving away one of the Argos jerseys as well as the Jousters merch. Please like and subscribe our videos. Get the notifications. Also, if you want to listen to us on audio, that's great too. We've had a lot of great downloads this last two in. Reed's showing off his teeth.
Well,
again.
If you don't want to see my teeth, you can just listen to the audio. If it's unbecoming, then you just. Yeah.
Our audio downloads have been great the last 2 weeks. We appreciate everybody that's just pulling them up on the podcast players as well. Don't want to downplay that. So want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.